أناجي الحق في ليل بهيم أصدق النجوى وأدعو الله من قلب سليم يطلب التقوى أناجي الحق في ليل بهيم أصدق النجوى وأدعو الله من قلب سليم يطلب التقوى.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaban bikum, and welcome to another edition of Perspective. My name is Faizel Patel. Any working mother can identify with a constant juggle of career and children, but when your business is breaking news to the world, the pressures you can find yourself under can be extreme. Katy Katopodis has been working with Prime Media Broadcasting since 1996 and with EWN since 1997, that's Eyewitness News. She's an accomplished radio journalist as well as motivational speaker and media trainer. She has been the editor-in-chief of Eyewitness News since August 2001. Katy has launched a book called I'm Missing News, where she shares her stories and pressures that sees her delicately attempting to balance the dual roles as editor Katy and mommy Katerina. And to tell us more about the book, in studio, we have Katy herself. Katy, thank you for your time this evening.
Hello, Faizel. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure to have you here. Your book has a very unique title. I understand there's a story behind it, I'm Missing News. I didn't get it at first, but you explained it very, very beautifully in the book. Can you tell us about it?
Yes, Faizel. The book is called I'm Missing News, and for many, many years, my children were exposed to eyewitness news and listening to the news bulletins. Yes. And essentially one day, my little one said to me, he was about 2 or 3 years old at that stage, and he said, Mommy, it's time for I'm Missing News. I couldn't quite understand what he was saying. I said, yes. What do you mean? He said, Mommy, it's I'm Missing News. And it turns out it was eyewitness news that he was trying to say. So I thought it was a very apt title because it basically talks to what the book is about. You know, when you are in the working environment, you feel like you're missing what's happening at home. When you're at home, you feel like you're missing what's happening in the world of news. So I thought it was quite apt.
Okay. Now, being in the field of journalism, I mean, I'm a journalist, you're a journalist as well. There's a delicate balancing act. You can be called to report at any time, whether it's the middle of the night, sometimes early hours of the morning. How difficult, or how do you manage to balance being a journalist and a mother at the same time? I know it's very difficult. Sometimes it will just be a complete dead news day and there's nothing happening. But at times, everything overwhelms you.
Well, you know, Faizel, I've always said to my 2 boys, my family comes first. Yes. They come first. They are my absolute priority. But they're also old enough to understand that mommy works in the world of news and that it is unpredictable at times. And there will be occasions when we are having some family or quality time together where I am drawn away from them. And I don't make a big deal of it, you know. For me, it's just about carry on doing what you're doing and I'll get back to you soon. But it's just about finding that balancing act. I give as much of myself as I can to whatever I'm doing at that moment. So if I'm with my children, and try and give as much of myself to them. When, however, I'm at work, I've got an amazing support structure at home. So I know that they are very well looked after, they are loved, they are taken care of, so I can focus on my work.
Okay. Now, well, obviously, you know, a lot of us, especially journalists or anybody that might be in a specific field, are career-orientated, and you want to push yourself to a limit or to a point where you want to go. You set for yourself goals before you get married. How does your husband, Costa, and the children cope with times you are being away from them during a major story? I know my wife sort of gets cross sometimes because you know you have to be there and this is part of your career and you have to sacrifice a little time. But obviously you will make up for the time at a later stage. But in your particular case, how do they actually cope with that? I mean, were they sort of hard on you in that aspect?
No, you know, for the most part, I think they're really fine. My husband is exceptionally supportive, and we have a bit of a deal amongst ourselves. So when he can be, if I can't be with the kids, then we try and make a plan that he is. And when he can't be at home, then we try and make a plan that I am. So no, you know, often I might get the odd comment from my 5-year-old who might say, where are you going now? And what's happening now? And are you going to work again? Yes, yes. But generally, they are, I like to believe, very well balanced. You know, the thing is, Faizel, that we do what we can in the moment. We do what we believe is right in the moment. So I'm doing what I think is right for my children right now.
Speaking about that, I mean, you wrote the book on news and balancing the breaking news with bringing up a family or looking after a family, including spending time with your husband. Is there many women that can identify with this particular book, especially if they're not journalists, maybe in another career?
It wasn't specifically. I've written as a journalist because that's what I know. This
Yes.
is my world. This is my A, it's my omega, if you like.
Of course.
But I'm hoping that the book can resonate with many working mums out there, irrespective of what field they're in. And the wonderful feedback I've received since publishing the book is from women who are either in nursing or doctors. I mean, I had someone who came up to me and said to me, you know, she works in a corporate environment, absolutely nothing to do with news, yet she could really resonate with this book because she felt like it was talking to her and her struggles to balance things as a working mum.
Katy, you've gone far in EWN. Obviously, you started very earlier. What inspired you to be a journalist? I mean, you know, sometimes they say you're born to be a journalist, but, you know, and sometimes people like myself used to like to tell stories from a young age. But in your case, I mean, what inspired you to want to go out there with bullets flying all over the place and then bring that to people that are gripped to the radio or the television screens?
I'm an adrenaline junkie to a certain degree. I think we all are as journalists.
Yes.
I love the idea that I work in a profession where I'm at the cutting edge of news as history unfolds. You know, there we are sitting at the very edge of that, watching history unfold and being a part of it. I think being a journalist, I've often said, Faizel, is more of a calling than it is a profession or a career. It's something that if you really want to do and do it well, it's very much in your DNA. You never stop. You don't switch off. So I can't say tomorrow's 5 o'clock and, you know, at 5 o'clock tomorrow I will switch off until Monday. It doesn't quite work like that. It's very much about what's happening in our environment all of the time and being switched on like that.
Okay. I want to digress a little bit away from the book. You know, a lot of people assume that, you know, being a journalist is about glamour and, you know, being on TV and radio. While part of it is that, maybe explain to our viewers what it takes to be a journalist in the best newsroom in the country.
Well, thank you for that. I do believe that EWN is a very good newsroom in the country. So thank you for that compliment. It takes a lot of hard work. You know, it takes a lot of hard work, a good work ethic, a commitment to telling stories in our country. For me, that's the important thing. What stories are unfolding in our country at the moment, and how do we as the media hold up a mirror to reflect the stories that are unfolding in South Africa? There are so many things to be told. So yes, there is a somewhat glamorous part. We forget about that when we're in the trenches, Faizel.
Yes.
But it certainly is about a dedication to telling the news stories that are unfolding.
You know, in one particular aspect of the book, in chapter 6, you write about a game that you and your son Alessandro play. It's called You Be Me and I'll Be You. Now, why I'm saying this is because children tend to emulate everything we do. I know my little one, when I'm filing a voicer for EWN or for anybody, it's, you know, you go into a room and to try to find a quiet place, and they can hear you still because through the doors, and they try to mimic you. And one day when I came home and I was like listening to my little daughter, it's like, Alia Patel, Eyewitness News. But, you know.
She can be our youngest recruit. I like that.
Absolutely.
She can be our youngest EWN reporter.
But I'm talking about the emulation, this game that you play and you mentioned in chapter 6. Maybe tell a little bit to our viewers about that.
So when my eldest son, he was very little, we used to play a game together.
Yes.
I be you and you be me, and we would do a bit of a role play. And it was fascinating because I would take on the role of him, and he would take on the role of mommy.
Yes.
And it's so interesting because we often talk as media that we hold up a mirror to reflect what's happening in society. That is amazing because they hold up a mirror to see, and we get to see how they see us as parents, you know. So it really is, it was quite an exciting and fun game that we used to play. But I must tell you a little anecdote. A few months ago, I was asked to do an interview for a magazine. And one of the questions was, how would your sons describe you? So I thought, oh, that's a great question. Let me go home and actually ask them. Because if there's one thing about my boys, is that they are exceptionally expressive. And they tell me what they're thinking and what they're feeling all the time. So I went home and I said, there's a magazine that would like to know, how do you describe mommy? And my eldest thought about it for a bit, and he said, oh, she is the prettiest, kindest mommy in the world, but sometimes she loves her iPhone more than us.
Absolutely brilliant.
So I thought that was very funny because it's true. You know, while we're there in the family environment, a lot of our news comes on our smartphones, and particularly as journalists in media, we are constantly connected, whether it's Twitter, whether it's Facebook, whatever it might be, whether it's emails, whether you're corresponding with your team, there's that constant connection.
Okay. You tune to Perspective. We're speaking to Katy Katopodis. She's the editor-in-chief of Eyewitness News, and she's also the author of I'm Missing News, absolutely brilliant book, which explains how to balance the delicate life of being a parent or a mother, and also with bringing breaking news to all the people in the country. And like she mentioned, news is cutthroat. It's such a tough environment, and being one of the best newsrooms in the country, the responsibility rests upon them to keep the masses clued up of what's happening in the country. We're going to go for the break. After the break, we're going to be continue speaking to Katy and get more perspective on this book, and also what's it like being a journalist and also being a mom at the same time. Stay tuned to Perspective.
صرت في ظرف عصيب فاكشف البلوى فيا ربي أنا.
Welcome back to Perspective. My name is Faizel Patel. This evening we're speaking to Katy Katopodis. She's the editor-in-chief of Eyewitness News and also the author of this brilliant book. I think you should actually get it. It's called I'm Missing News, and she's giving us some perspective on what's it like being a journalist in one of the most toughest environments or toughest newsrooms possibly in the country, but also the best, and also managing and being a parent at the same time. Now, Katy, before the break, we spoke about being a journalist, how tough it is. Also one of the things about being a journalist is being the first to get the story and a certain amount of risk that comes with it. In chapter 2 of the book, you talk about when the bullets came flying. Tell us about that day.
Well, this was the day that Sifiso Nkabinda had been assassinated in KwaZulu-Natal. And essentially what had happened is that I was out with Xolani Gwala, my colleague, who's now on Talk Radio 702, and we'd been sent down to cover Sifiso Nkabinda's assassination. And my word, did the bullets come flying. It was actually quite unbelievable, Faizel. It was a very tense situation. Members of an entire family had been assassinated as well following the assassination of Nkabinda. And there were rivals within the community who had started shooting in broad daylight. And there I was with Xolani, literally ducking the bullets. They came flying from all directions. We're talking about live ammunition here. I was a young reporter at the time, so was he. And it's certainly something that made a mark, that left its mark, particularly on me as a journalist and on my career. It's a day that I'll actually never forget. And
I can understand where you're coming from, because we also covered the Union Buildings protest just a few weeks ago, where we had this the student protesting, pushing the fence down at Union Buildings and police firing. I mean, I was there. It's really is scary. So you can understand the apprehension, the fear that goes through you, while at the same time trying to bring the story.
I must admit, I wasn't scared at the time.
Yes.
So you've got all of this going on around you. You've literally got bullets flying. You are trying to file on air every half an hour.
Yes.
But fear wasn't something that I was conscious of. And I think it's probably best. Otherwise, I might have just frozen, as we all would, in that really dangerous situation if we find ourselves in. So I might have just ended up freezing in that moment.
Yes.
But the fear comes afterwards, when in retrospect, you think, my goodness, that was a dangerous situation.
On Nelson Mandela's inauguration as president after he was released from prison was a majestic day in history. I mean, the freedom that we enjoy today is 27 years in prison. Was a great day in history. You were invited to the event. You had the opportunity to interview then Libyan President Muammar Gaddafi. I know there's a story behind this, but you will not allow it until. Tell us what happened next.
I must admit, I will never forget what happened on that day.
Yes.
And there are moments in life that will just, will stay with you for the rest of your days. And that is definitely one of those moments. So there we were. It was actually at President Thabo Mbeki's inauguration.
Yes.
So it was President Thabo Mbeki's inauguration, and we were on the lawns of the Union building, and I was covering it for EWN at the time. And towards the end of the day, the pressure had subsided. There wasn't that, rolling coverage as you will, and it was about just walking around finding stories.
Yes.
And in the far distance, I had noticed that there were two men sitting on the grass, and they had been surrounded by journalists. So I approached them, and I realized, it's Sam Nujoma and Muammar Gaddafi. And I took my microphone out and I asked Muammar Gaddafi for an interview, but he refused to give it to me, and motioned at that moment for me to sit on his lap. And I said, no, I can't do that. He said, no, come. come sit here. And I said, no, I definitely can't do that. And in that moment, actually, I felt a shove. And I was motioned towards Gaddafi, and I did end up sitting on his lap. And it's quite something. So I was sitting on Muammar Gaddafi's lap as he just stroked my hair on the one side. I had Sam Nujoma on the other side. Talk about freezing. I really froze in that moment because there were no questions. I mean, I don't even think I asked. I was mortified. If the earth could have opened me up and swallowed me whole, it would have been better than that moment. But it's certainly a memory that I would that I'd keep.
Speaking on that, I mean, obviously, you know, journalists sometimes tend to transgress the boundaries to get a story. I mean, what's the ethics or what's the rule regarding getting as much information? I mean, you could be the first in the country to have that particular story, but then obviously you have to sort of transgress your morals and your values. I mean, if there is a guideline for journalists or maybe for viewers that intend pursuing a career in journalism, where do you draw the line?
Well, I don't think you should ever transgress your morals and your values. I think your value system needs to be very, very firmly in place. And you need to be guided as a journalist by the ethics of journalism. And the ethics, I think, are very, very clear. The minute you think you've overstepped a boundary and suddenly your own personal values and your moral system comes into question, then you've done things the wrong way. So definitely not. Okay.
Now, journalism and being a journalist can be a pressurized job with constant deadlines, graveyard shifts in the busy newsroom. You know, sometimes the pressure just gets to you because, you know, you don't have the time to relax and you know, you're fatigued. But at EWN one day, I mean, there was one particular news anchor that just lost it completely. And in your book, you speak about the F-bomb on EWN. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, that was certainly the most interesting resignation that I've ever received. So it was quite late at night, and we had an overnight news anchor who went on air and dropped a whole lot of F-bombs. I think 13 or 14. I've lost count, or I've forgotten. It was about 13 or 14 F-bombs that he dropped in one news bulletin. So that was certainly quite something. And of course the phone starts ringing saying, I think your news anchor's gone a little bit mad. What's happening there? Was it the pressure that got to him? Was it the graveyard shift that got to him? I'm not sure. He was young. He was quite inexperienced actually, hence the reason he was on the graveyard shift. And I'm not sure where he is today. I should try and follow up and see what on earth has happened to Mark Esterhazen.
No, absolutely. I mean, obviously, you know, where the times are happening, and we're not going to mention some of the F-bombs that he mentioned, but he spoke about Malema and a whole lot of other stuff. But working in an environment, especially EWN, I know it can be very, very difficult because there's so many other mainstream media houses across. What does it mean to you to be the first to report on a story in the country?
It's very important to be first, but more important than being first is accuracy, Faizel. So we always encourage our reporters to say being first is important, being right is even more important. So I believe that Eyewitness News can compete with major newsrooms across the country, actually. We don't see ourselves as a radio newsroom at all, actually. We see ourselves as a newsroom that has news on various platforms, radio being just one of them, social media. Then we've got our online platforms as well. So yes, it's important to be first, but it's even more important to be accurate.
Okay. And we've just got a few minutes left. You've been editor for Eyewitness News for close to 15 years now. Where do you see yourself going from here? And obviously, this magnificent book that Katy's written, where can people get hold of this book?
Where do I see myself going? Let me tackle that question first, Faizel. You know, the one thing I've loved about my career at EWN, it's never been the same. It's always evolved, it's always moved. And my personal philosophy is, as long as you're moving and not standing still in anything you're doing in life, then you're on the right track. So EWN has morphed over the years. What I was doing when I began all those years ago is definitely not what I'm doing now. So it's just to keep growing, keep moving. In the media industry, I love news, I love journalism, I love media, I love telling stories, I love growing people and mentoring people, actually. So that for me is also a huge personal accomplishment, seeing a person who entered as a young reporter who does exceptionally well for themselves. So it's just about growing, actually, both for me and for the team.
Okay, and finally, just if viewers want to get hold of this book, this magnificent book, where do they get hold of it?
I think you can find it at Exclusives if it's not on the shelves anymore, because it did get published, I think, 18 months, almost 2 years ago now. You can maybe contact the publisher or speak to Exclusives and they can order it in.
Okay, and Katie, we just got a minute left. Maybe any comments to our viewers, your last thoughts and comments?
You know, in terms of last thoughts and comments, thank you first of all for having me here, Faizel. I love it when I see communities come up with initiatives that allow our audiences and our communities to have access to news and current affairs and talk shows. So I really commend you for what you're doing here.
Thank you so much.
I think it's a wonderful project, and we need to encourage communities across South Africa actually to keep that media spirit alive, because the more we're able to give communities a voice, I think the healthier our democracy will be.
Katy Katopodis, thank you so much for your time this evening. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
That was Katy Katopodis, author of this magnificent book, and available in bookshops, even on Kindle and even online as well. So get yourself a copy. It will give you an idea of what it's like being a journalist and also being a parent at the same time. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of this week's edition of Perspective. Remember, you can join me again next week where we discuss stories making local, national and international headlines. You can keep in touch with me. Send me a tweet on Faizi143, a comment on facebook.com/Faizel Patel, or if you prefer email, you can send me a mail on faisal@itvnetworks.tv. From myself, Faizel Patel, and Katy, and the magnificent team here at ITV, fi amanillah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
أناجي الحق في ليل بهيم أصدق النجوى وأدعو الله من قلب سليم يطلب التقوى أناجي الحق في ليل بهيم أصدق النجوى وأدعو الله من قلب سليم يطلب التقوى إلهي صرت في ظرف عصيب فاكشف البلوى فيا ربي أنا عبد لرد الضيم لا يقوى